Getting my first car was a huge step forward in my journey as an immigrant and even as a human being. It provided me with a freedom that I never knew I even needed. I was able to go to work without having to bother my wife, make those cool videos that people do in their cars, save money on Uber. My self-esteem got a huge boost by this seemingly simple ability to move around. I could go anywhere I wanted, whenever I wanted, if I wanted it. My wife often says that your first car has to be a cheap car because when, not if, when you total it, when you wreck it completely, it's going to be easier for you to, have to pay it back or buy a new one without paying a note on a car, on a wrecked car, while not owning it anymore. And I thought I was special until I wasn't. When I imagined my first accident, I never would have thought in the world that my thought at impact, that a predominant thought in my mind at impact was going to be, why didn't I take a shower this morning? The movie lied. There was no slow motion, no sense of enlightenment. My life didn't flash before me. Only a lot of shock, worry, and a deep-seated feeling of shame. I just left the hospital from a routine test and I decided to drive by Walmart. I've driven this particular road at least 20 times in the past 3 to 6 months. It was a nice day. No snow, no sludge, no rain. I was on the second lane, slowing down to make my left turn, and before I realized it, airbag hit my chest, knees are bruised, glasses are flying out, something in the front is exploding, and I just knew that I was not going to make the video I thought I was going to make that day. I hurt both my knees and then my back hurt, especially when I'd laughed after. But all this I found out later on, and there's this little bruise here. Which finger is it? This one. There's a blood clot. You cannot see it. There's a little blood clot here that's probably going to be a permanent reminder of that particular day. The couple on the other car had to be taken to the hospital. The man came out of the car and he had some bleeding on his hand right here, and his wife, I believe, was still in the car. She couldn't get out of the car. I felt so much shame, like a lot of shame. I had tears in my eyes, calling 911, and the man, I was watching this man trying to make sure his wife was okay. So my witnesses came to assist us, called 911. Even though I did not feel like I had caused it, I did not feel like I intentionally wanted to get into this situation. It didn't matter. I did not think at that point oh yeah, you guys did this or I did this. It was just people got hurt and I was there, and somehow I had a role to play in it. And I feel like if I wasn't on that road that particular morning at that particular time, maybe they would have just gone straight and not have to get into this situation with me, My car was totaled, wrecked completely, non-usable, and I had to call the tow to come get it. Paid $120 for that to be moved from the location to our yard. And actually today, which is 2 weeks later, today I finally got rid of the car because you can't fix it. I remember calling 911 with my fingers were tingling. I guess it was adrenaline. There was feelings, and the airbag exploded, so my chest hurt a little bit. Don't ask me how or why I didn't take any pictures. I was just sitting there by the side of the road and just felt like my head was so big, like it was the biggest thing. Yeah, my head felt really huge. In the foreword of the recent edition of the book Man's Search for Meaning, Harold S. Kushner recollects a piece of insight from Viktor Frankl himself. That's the late author of the book. Forces beyond your control can take away everything you possess, except one thing: your freedom to choose how you will respond to the situation. You cannot control what happens to you in life, but you can always control what you will feel and do about what happens to you. Later the same day, while telling my father what had happened, I found out that at the same time that I was having my accident here in Pueblo, my aunt, my father's last living direct sibling, had died. And I don't know if God saved me or if my aunt died so that I could live. I think we decide what meaning is for us. Like the Nova effect, things can be either good or bad depending on how we look at it. It's not even about being optimistic or pessimistic. Before the accident, I started listening to a lot of Naval Ravikant, the angel philosopher. And what I do usually when I find an author or somebody that I find, particularly fascinating, I want to learn from, I start digging deep. And there's one particular question that Naval has had to answer on a couple of shows, including the Joe Rogan show and even Farnham Street's The Knowledge Project. And this particular question, which you probably have thought about yourself, is what's the meaning of life? And Naval has 3 answers to that question, but my favorite answer so far is the very last one, which is the meaning of life is whatever you attribute to it. In the same vein, there's no meaning inherent to my accident, to my birth, your birth, my aunt's death, apart from whatever meaning I, you, or we choose to attribute to it. Your worst day is someone's best day. The birth of your child could be the death of someone's dreams. Your last day at work where you start building your business could be somebody's death sentence. Right now, I choose to see this accident as a miracle. I know it probably doesn't come across this way, but it could have been so much more worse. Here I am, sitting and talking with you, albeit quite sadly. There was this moment back at the house after I came back and the car was towed, where it was just me and my wife, where she hugged me and she said, "I don't know what I would have done if you weren't okay." My wife is a doctor. She's a family doctor and she's a resident here in Pueblo. And from the things she's seen, the kinds of things she goes through on a regular basis, I've learned not to expect like typical reactions from her, just from her perspective. Just the fact that I was able to call her after I called 911 and tell her, that alone lifted a huge weight from her. I don't know what would have happened if somebody else had called her and maybe started by saying, your husband had an accident. When I called my dad, I started by telling him that I was okay. Like the first thing I told him was I'm physically okay, before explaining to him what had happened and how I was feeling about all of it. And at that same time, while I was telling him that, my aunt was dying in Cameroon. Can there be any meaning to this? Is there something here about death and love and how what really matters are the people who will miss us? So the question I ask myself is, what remains true? No matter how many times my wife told me I was going to get into an accident, I still got into an accident. You simply can never be too prepared for anything, which means you should always prepare forever, enjoy the ride, and always be bracing for impact. I don't know how insurance works in Cameroon. In fact, I don't know how insurance works here, but one thing that got me thinking was how different things would have been if this was happening in Cameroon. Like, I literally have no idea what would have happened. In fact, by the time I called 911, the police were there in a couple of minutes, the ambulance pulled up, the roads were blocked, traffic was being redirected, and information was exchanged before, all happened in under 30 minutes to an hour. And while all this was happening, while they were talking about, coverage and having the conversations with my insurance, I just couldn't help myself to wonder, do we have these things in Cameroon? And if we do, how available is it to the lay person, the average person? Like, do we actually know what is within our rights, and how could things be different? And that's just one of those differences that I see almost every single day about how different the cultures and the nations are. I can't even begin to imagine the privilege I have to be able to afford insurance. Hell, even a car. How many people get crushed weekly? How many people have to ride their bicycles, which is great for exercise, but what happens when that's the only thing you can afford? Like, you literally cannot afford a car. What about you cannot afford a cab in Cameroon? So how many people go through this situation and then end up dying of internal bleeding because they could not afford to go get checked medically? Maybe the tools were not available. I'm just more reminded of the privilege that I actually have to be here, and in the same vein, the privilege that we all have in a certain way, because I think every single person has a certain level of privilege, whether they want it or not. Like, just the fact that you're able to watch this, for example, on your device. There's someone who cannot afford the next meal somewhere, but does that actually stop you from enjoying the things? It's the whole dilemma of, do you have to stop your pain because it compares, miserably to someone else's pain? And sometimes I think you cannot measure pain that way, and I don't even know. I guess something for another video. I emailed my writing workshop participants about the accident because we're supposed to have a session that same day, or actually the next day. And I saw my wife, I spoke with my dad, and even my little sister tried to cheer me up. I hardly take naps, but after that, when my wife eventually, she found out I was sort of okay and I could survive a few hours without her. She left for work, and then I stayed I just took like hours of naps. The only thing I wanted to do at that time was to just watch the Midnight Gospel, which is this cool show that I found on Netflix. I was just zoning out between sleep and watching the show and having dreams. I had some kind of crazy dreams. I had a dream of my brother and I had a dream where my dog got missing. Had another dream where I was arguing with my wife, and a dream where Leslie, my friend, found a dog. Like, it was just so crazy things. And then I'm sure you know how dreams get crazy. I slept for hours. I only woke up when my wife returned. And it feels like I saw the people that I cared about in the dream. No matter how I look at my life now, no matter how passionate I am about storytelling and freedom and achieving potential, if anything that I figured out from this particular accident was how important intimate relationships were for me as an individual, how these bonds mattered. That continues to be a thread through a lot of things. I feel like those who matter the most are those who will miss us if we're gone. Maybe the meaning of life is to make sure that we are missed when we are gone. So I spoke with my insurance, and apparently the couple in the other car got discharged the same day. So that's great. I was very much pleased about that. My back doesn't hurt as much. In fact, I don't think it hurts that much anyway. And then my knees, I still feel a little bit of pain when I press them, but I'm working just fine. And there's a blood clot here to just remind me. It's like a thin, like a dot, just to remind me of, what happened. I didn't get any major life insights. I didn't see the future. I didn't see my mistakes and go back to fix them. I increased my hours of work because now definitely need to buy a new car. I am way more aware of my privilege now. I mean, I don't think it's changed much. I've always been aware of my privilege. It's just that it just came a little bit more to the forefront of, being able to actually own a car, being able to afford insurance, living in this country, having all these tools. I try to remember of that privilege, and I think maybe even cuts across not just the privilege of owning things, but the privilege of existing and even good health and family and friends. People like my wife, Queenie, whose kindness and support, and even though she warned me about this, I mean, it could have been worse. And I'm happy that I have people like her, and also grateful for my friend Willie, who you once saw on the channel, who helped me actually get this car. I mean, I still have pictures of it too. I got the car. And Willie, if you're watching this, thanks, man. I really appreciate your friendship and everything that you've done for us. That's really cool. So I'm still here. Whatever meaning I choose to derive from this is entirely up to me. There's already a lot the world is dealing with at this time. I mean, I'm not going to come and tell you what's happening everywhere, and yet the fact that my aunt died on that same day that I was getting the accident makes me think about the problems. Like, we talk about all these problems on social media and all these big platforms and all these things that are, front and center stage. But what if our real problems actually are not on the stage anywhere? And maybe the big problems are just, veneers. And maybe the real problems, the real accidents, they don't happen on the left turn, and they happen daily to us. And the seatbelts that we have, the airbags, are the people that care about us, the people who show up for us when we need them. People that we take for granted because we see them every day and we make jokes and tease them, our siblings, our family, our friends, our spouses. Maybe those are the real MVPs that we ignore until it's too late. The real solutions, the real airbags are those people, the people we simply should love. And what if love was the ultimate insurance? I'll leave you with a quote from Viktor Frankl himself, which pretty much sums up this whole video. Life holds potential meaning under any conditions, even the most miserable ones. Everything you did brought you to this particular moment. Whatever you do next, your next steps, your next actions, you can choose to look at it as all those things happened for you. All the confusion, the betrayal, the pain, the hurt, all those built you into who you are today. I choose to see life that way now, because the alternative kind of sucks. And after everything I've survived, hundreds of car rides, plane rides, train rides, even, I don't ride a bicycle, multiple surgeries, being married for 2 years, being black in America. The one thing I know to be more true than the media wants me to believe is that I'm actually a lot more in control of a lot of things, particularly how I react to things, which is something that I need to remember, and that this accident brought me thinking about, reflecting a lot more about this. Sometimes it's easy to forget that that's something that we have, that's something that I have, the ability to be able to look at things and decide how I'm going to deal with them, how I'm going to take on this, new challenge, new event in my life. Things happen, and then we have to decide what we do with them. And that's the thing that I feel that you can do too. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I know it wasn't exactly, upbeat and energetic, and as you can imagine, the topic of conversation is a hard one. And even apart from the accident, I'm dealing with some very difficult things happening right now in my private life that I probably will never talk about because it's just really private. And I wanted to let you know that I'm grateful you're here, and if you've watched up to this particular point, thank you very much. I didn't make this video for pity. I made this video for myself. I know I'm sharing with you. I know I'm not just talking alone and I'm putting it on the internet for people to watch and listen, but this really got me thinking about my direction in life, and I wanted to have something to represent my core thoughts, the idea of meaning, the idea of making use of everything that happens, especially things that are threatening and dangerous. And I'm very much aware that there are people out there, and I say out there, I mean in the world, who are going through things that are actually way more difficult. People who actually go through accidents and lose a limb. People who go through accidents and then they survive, but everybody else in the car dies, and maybe everybody else was their family. So I'm painfully aware that I'm incredibly lucky and blessed, which is why I was making this video to remind me that whatever happens in life, we get to choose the meaning in that. And thanks for watching. My name is Kamga. I make videos here, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you should. If you have subscribed and you haven't turned on notification yet, maybe you should too. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.